Time of the gentleman has expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Huizenga, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it, and I do appreciate your time being here. I know my colleagues, Mr. Meeks, on the other side, touched on this a little bit. I'd like to explore our international competitiveness, and can't help but note that we're the only advanced economy that has adopted this prohibition on proprietary trading. And I'm concerned that, therefore, we are creating a significant competitive disadvantage. It's my understanding that Director White, you had talked a little bit about this in response, but to my other colleague who was just bringing up sort of the absence of a solution, it's kind of like saying I'm going to punish my oldest son for the boneheaded move of one of his friends that got his friend into trouble, but my son's been living by the rules and hasn't had any problems. So, you know, the logic of saying, well, if we're not going to come up with and replace this Volcker rule with another rule means somehow we condone bad behavior by somebody else is ridiculous on its face. But please explore with me a little bit of how in the world this does not put us at a tremendous competitive advantage. The contacts that I have in Europe, and I've worked through the TLD and a number of other organizations, I've got relationships over there in London and Germany and other places. The indications that I have had is they're not going to be adopting a Volcker-like rule at this point. We've got extensive connections in Canada as well. They're telling me the same thing. In fact, they're all going, hey, we'll take the business because you guys are now making it more difficult. So please, somebody help me with this.
Congressman, I can go back and say that it is the case that as of now, nobody has adopted something that looks like a version of the Volcker rule. But as I earlier indicated, what has been, I think, worthy of remark is that immediately after the adoption of the Volcker rule in the U.S. as part of Dodd-Frank, there was essentially no interest in the concept in other major financial centers. And in the intervening few years, what we've seen is not just, as in the case of the European Commission's proposal, something that looks very much like Volcker, but we've seen in other countries things that are variants on ring fencing within institutions, variants on different capital requirements for different kinds of activities, some of which would go beyond what we have in the United States.
So you're willing to wait until they put something in place to keep us at a competitive disadvantage?
Well, Congressman,
do you acknowledge that we're at a competitive disadvantage?
There will surely, whenever one prohibits a firm or a set of firms from doing anything, there is at least going to be some change in the ground on which they compete. I think the question of the magnitude of that is a pretty important one, and this gets back to Chair White's point about how market making, for example, which is a vital service that the large broker-dealers play, is something that I think everybody on this panel wants to see preserved. And that's why, as I said earlier, the implementation that takes account of the variations and the characteristics of instrument liquidity markets is important.
Let's let Chair White address that then quickly.
I mean, just very quickly. I mean, I think that the statute has obviously mandates that this rule carries out. We were very sensitive within those parameters of the statutory mandates, to competitive effects. I think I gave a couple of examples of that. But in terms of the magnitude of the effects, I mean, I think that's something you have to, look going forward.
Okay, that was close to being a congressional answer in that you gave no answer. But okay, maybe let's do a show of hands. Who here is satisfied with putting the rule in place, knowing that it will put us at some sort of competitive disadvantage for whatever period of time until the rest of the world catches up? Are you all comfortable with that? Are you all uncomfortable with that?
No, Congress. I think I'm comfortable with where we are here. But again, let's not lose sight of the reasons why countries put financial regulations in the first.
No, but we're not talking about why we would put financial regulations. We're talking about this particular financial regulation. One that puts us at a competitive disadvantage when there hasn't been a problem with it here in the United States. And I heard someone brought up the London whale. All right, that's a completely separate issue from what we're dealing with here in the United States. So we're not talking about It's either Volcker rule or we're not going to have any rules and it's going to be the wild, wild west. The question is the Volcker rule actually going to put us at a competitive disadvantage with the rest of the world? Anybody want to use the last 5 seconds? I wish you could hit your mic because I heard you say it's possible.
Yeah.
It's possible, but
We need to see what the full impact of the rule is, and we'll need to see what other jurisdictions do to compare what the competitive impact will be or not be.
all right, Mr. Chairman, just if you'll indulge me, I will be sending a letter to each one of you asking how long that impact you're willing to wait. Is it 6 months? Is it a year? Is it 3 years? What period of time are you willing do you need for that information? Thank you.
Time of the gentleman has expired. Chair now recognizes